Welcome to another episode of Empowered 305. With us here today, we have a very knowledgeable person, someone that has 3 decades of experience in code. Robert Santos-Alborná. Welcome.
Thank you for having me here. Pleasure.
It is an honor to have you because we have spoken in the past, and I know you've been with the city for...
Well, I'm now for my 2nd year, so time flies when you're having fun.
With that comes a wealth of knowledge in the industry, and talk to me a little bit about that.
So I've been technically doing code for nearly 3 decades, 23 years in Miami-Dade County, nearly 6 years in Miami Beach, and another nearly 6 years in Palm Beach County. So one of the things that I believe that I value added to the city is the ability to compare and contrast and look for, better processes. And that's one of the things that I have been focusing on for code.
So with all that experience, definitely, I have seen that it could be a little tricky. Code could be a little tricky. So can you expand on that a little?
So one of the greatest challenges that we have is meeting expectations. And that comes from both the complainant and respondent. So people that complain about code believe sometimes that we have a magic wand and things get done right away, right? Yeah. And the individual that receives the violation, there is a due process that we have to be very mindful of. So we have to walk this tightrope, right, between due process, providing notice, and then following up to make sure that there is compliance. It is a very tricky balance that we need to achieve because there's laws that we must adhere to, and those are the framework. Without getting too complicated, but the framework lies in the Florida Statutes 162. So we have to provide notice, reasonable time to comply. Those are absolutely crucial every single time.
Talk to me about short-term rentals and what the person needs to do in order to report it. So
to report it, very simple, call 311. And we're going to discuss that a little bit because that's one of the major accomplishments that we have done. Our response time has improved tremendously, right? From 10 days 2 years ago to 1 day today. So on average, we respond to all complaints within 1 day. Let's talk about short-term vacation rentals. So in the state of Florida, privacy rights are very, very strong. We know that short-term vacation rentals have an adverse effect on the neighborhood, right? It becomes a residential property, becomes commercial. And usually comes with noise, they throw parties, excessive parking, garbage.
A nuisance.
Right. Technically. So sometimes individuals complain and they believe, okay, I complained, this is going to be rectified right away. Unfortunately, no. So we must provide notice, right? So we go to the property in question, and if there are violations, noise, or indeed short-term vacation rental, we need to provide notice. Sometimes it's an LLC, sometimes it's a sub-renter. We provide notice, and now we do what is called an adjudication. Bring it to a board. But there is a due process that I must follow, right? So we have to obtain sufficient evidence to bring it to an adjudication. And then after that, if they don't comply, then there are fines. So during this period, the complainant, the neighbor, is like, what is happening? I reported to code a week ago, and they're still doing it. And the respondent has certain rights that we must adhere to. So it's a delicate balance. We follow each and every case.
Right.
Our adjudication rate is fantastic here in the city, almost at 98%.
Wow.
That's very, very, very good. But we can, in a case where police is involved, let's say if they open a trunk without permission, then the whole case falls apart. For us, it's the same thing. I have to follow a very detailed process to obtain my evidence. Otherwise, the case is flawed.
It's midnight hours.
Yes.
Obviously, they're not going to call 311 at that time, but their immediate reaction is to call 911.
So
what happens there?
They can call 911, which police can do a warm transfer to code, or they can call our hotline. And that's one of the things that we've done, which is quite good. From Sundays through Thursdays, we work until 1 a.m. And you call the hotline for a noise complaint, and we will be there within 30 minutes. And on Fridays and Saturdays, we work until 3 a.m. So they call the hotline number, and we will respond. If there are other violations in addition to noise, short-term vacation rental, excessive parking, parking on the grass, obstructing the public right-of-way, we will address those comprehensively because that's part of our process, right?
That is a very, very good point you brought up, because I know that people don't know that there's a code attached to it. They immediately think that the police is going to respond, and they do.
Mm-hmm.
They respond, but there's an attachment to it, and there's what you come in, the code.
Right.
And I think that's important for our viewers and our listeners to know that most definitely there is a code violation once you go and start looking into it.
And one of the things that we do very well is collaborate with other departments. So we have collaborative efforts with police, with building department, with fire department, with public works. And so we do every week we have what is called dry hour, where we go with all these various departments and address some of the venues that have some issues of concern. But in addition to that, some of the ones that you talked about, that noise complaints, after hours, there are times that we both respond together.
The composition is code, fire, police.
And building.
Okay, that's a good thing for people to know. They don't know that there's an actual task force,
Right.
and that's to alleviate all these initial complaints.
So that task force, dry hour, we address a lot of the businesses that may be operating outside the allowable scope, such as what? A restaurant that, lo and behold, at 11 o'clock, it goes through a metamorphosis and it transforms into a club. And why is that wrong? Well, there are certain zoning regulations, right? So if you're a restaurant, you're supposed to be playing ambient music, not a full club that may be keeping awake the neighbors. So
Right.
we are indeed a country of laws, and there's a process to follow. And there's a huge difference between a restaurant and a club. And so part of our job is to educate, and there's a process that respondent, that applicant needs to follow.
What is your team doing about educating people about the regulations? A lot of people probably don't know. What does your team do to get the word out?
So in addition to venues such as this one, right, and in our website,
Right.
We do community outreach to homeowner associations and civic groups, and provide information as to something as simple as what do we do with an overgrown lot, or things such as short-term vacation rentals, or certain commercial activities in a residential area. So it's an issue of educating the public. We also have to educate ourselves. There's continuous changes in the law. Recently, we implemented a peddler ordinance that requires them to be moving at all times. We have to do an internal training that involves the legal department. So we are in a constant state of flux and constantly learning. And for the public, the community outreach is absolutely key component of what we do.
What are some of the challenges that you see between the people that are actually filing the complaints, some anonymous, some actually put their name to it, and your team, and how you work together to be able to give that complainant, everything's going to be fine, things should be going back to normal. Does your team contact the complainant if the person gives their name?
So that's a great question, and let me tell you why. In July 2021, not that long ago, the legislation changed that anonymous complaints per Florida Statutes 16203 and 12569 is prohibited. What does that mean? That a person cannot call and say, hey, I want to remain anonymous. And there's a lot of negative impact as a result of that. People feel, I can't do this, and I'm concerned with reprisal. Unfortunately, this is what the statutes say. So for every complainant, the person must provide their name. All right, so that's part of the education process. We advise the complainant of what the case number and the expectations. On an overgrown lot, sometimes individuals think that the government, the city, county, or state, will go in and clear and mow private property. Before we do that, I have to go through a process. I have to get probably injunctive relief. If it's open accessible, I have to provide notice that I'm going to do this so that the respondent has the ability to take action. So it's a balancing act. It is a challenge. We strive to educate the respondent, the complainant, and our staff all the time.
before we end? Because I know we have a host of
We could be
items.
here for 8 hours.
Definitely. And I know I want to invite you back another time, and laws do change. And I want to make sure that between you and I, we continue to educate our residents and our business owners. It's very important, and the laws are continuously changing. So you have an open invitation to come back on
Thank you.
Empowered
Thank
305.
you.
And it's important that you're able to get the word out and tell people of these uncertainties that they probably do have.
So one of the things I wanted to do was to provide that hotline, right, where the public can call after 5 p.m. until 1 a.m. Or 3 a.m. on Fridays and Saturdays. And that number is 786-457-0995. So that's 786-457-0995.
And then, of course, 311.
Yes, which is very simple. Again, one of the greatest accomplishments that we've done is the turnaround time on those complaints. And we're doing from 10 days 2 years ago to less than a day today. So that's kudos,
great.
kudos to,
Awesome.
to the co-compliance team.
Awesome. You have a
That's
great
them.
team.
Yes.
You really do.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for being with us today, and we'll see you soon on another episode.
Thank you.
That's all for today's Empowered 305. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.